Hello out there, my delightful ghouls and goblins, and welcome back to The Fog. I'm Taylor, your casual crypt keeper, and boy howdy do I have something for you today. I love a good cryptid around here. What little glimpses we can get of these paranatural creatures keep me going. So let's head out into the woods. Make sure to bring your blurriest camera lens as we go hunting for the unexplainable. This is the top 5 terrifying cryptids even the devil fears. Let's go. Now before we dive right on in, I love hearing stories about cryptids from the world over. I think local folklore is so cool. Do you have a monster from your culture or your state's folklore or something that's really prevalent? Let us know down below in the comments and maybe we got some fodder for a new video. Okay, now let's dive on in. Number 5, Mothman. We had to start with a classic. He was either going to be number 5 or number 1, and I figured we'd get him out of the way first. He's maybe one of the most universally recognized and classic cryptids out there. He's West Virginia's unofficial mascot, and he's as beloved as the Appalachians and buckwheat pancakes. You've probably heard of Mothman a bunch before, but do you know his backstory? You know where his legends and his legacies start? Unless you're a West Virginia native, maybe not, so let's shed some light on the Mothman. Because he would probably love that, you know, he's a moth, he's drawn to it. Most Mothman fans agree that his first reported sighting was in the 1960s, 1966 to be exact. The story goes that a young couple, one Roger and Linda Scarberry, had been driving around at night when they saw a large creature whose eyes were glowing red, standing at the side of the road near the site of an old World War II munitions plant. Now, Linda described this being as being 7 foot tall, muscular, with giant wings and nightmarish glowing red eyes. Upon being illuminated, the creature pursued them all the way to Point Pleasant. Now, one isolated sighting does not make a cryptid legend, so it was probably the repeated sightings that propelled our favorite moth into legend status. For the next few weeks, Virginians kept reporting sightings of a bizarre, large bird-like creature with glowing red eyes. On December 15th, 1967, the Silver Bridge in West Virginia collapsed, with several locals conspiring that the Mothman was involved and could be seen flying away from the crime scene. I always thought he was benevolent, just like a fun, I don't know, guy. I didn't know he did stuff like that. This is unwelcome news. Maybe it's just because we all like the idea of him so much. He does look weirdly cuddly, but Mothman is an absolutely beloved figure to West Virginia and cryptid fans all over. He's kind of larger than life, and it's easy to forget that the first initial sightings and reports of him was that he was a paranormal threat intent on harming humans, considering just how adorable he is now. He's got movies, stuffed toys, and even a festival in his hometown dedicated to celebrating our favorite freak. And if you're looking for more stories of freaks of nature, or the nature of freaks, stories too good to be true and stories too true to be good, well, we've got all of that and then some on Top 5 Scary. Click through, I guarantee you'll find something you like, and then subscribe and stay scared if you do. But hey, keep watching this video first because we got way more cryptids to get through before we hit the credits. Let's keep going. Number 4, the Rougarou. Oh, that is so fun to say. Say that at home with me around. Rougarou. Oh, rolls off the tongue. Our next entry takes us deep into the swamps of Louisiana. Deep beneath the brush of the bayou, amidst all the flies, crawfish, toads, and gators, lies something sinister in the sunshiny Pelican State. Alright, I'll knock that off. I won't do that for the rest of the video. I won't torture you. The Rougarou is a centuries-old cryptid, a more Cajun answer to the werewolf. The name Rougarou actually is a direct link from the French word for werewolf, loup-garou, shifting over time. If you L to an R if you can hear it there, I don't know. My accent's not great. The history of the Rougarou can vary greatly, with differing legends and conflicting fables telling different stories of the beast's origins or motives, but it can all be traced all the way back to medieval France. Back in those days, a lot could go wrong. Lost crops, your livestock goes missing, your children go missing, your house burns down, all your investments in cryptocurrency go up in smoke and all your apes get stolen. Any number of terrible things could happen to a French medieval peasant. And when that would happen, instead of cursing out or lashing out at the sky, you would blame the Rougarou for your troubles. It's very easy to pin all your problems on an imaginary werewolf. I do that all the time. I stub my toe, I curse out a werewolf. Villages would capture people who they believed to be acting strangely, or even sometimes just somebody who lived out in the woods and pin all the blame on the village's problems on them for being a werewolf. So unfair the discrimination werewolves receive. This tradition of blaming an invisible werewolf for your problems led to the Rougarou becoming a fixture in legends passed down from French Catholics, mostly about behaving. Stories would be told of how if you didn't behave, you didn't follow your parents' rules, the Rougarou would come and he'd snatch you from your bed in the middle of the night and carry you off in the woods. Or sometimes he's like a very Catholic monster. If you didn't adhere to the rules of Lent every year, your sinful ways would see you transforming into a Rougarou. So it's a Catholic werewolf born out of naughty behavior instead of being bit by one. How exactly someone like transforms into a Rougarou is not made super clear, like if it only happens on full moons or if it's a one and done kind of thing and then you're a furry for life. All that's known is that the Rougarou is a deadly creature of the night, stalking the swamps, giving pause to travelers who dare explore the bayou late at night. But hey, so long as you mind your P's and Q's and you promise to give up whatever you said you would for Lent, you and the Rougarou should be headed in different directions. Hopefully. Number 3, Skinwalkers. This one is a very popular cryptid online, and you've probably heard a great deal about them before if you're a fan of this kind of thing. But the term does kind of get thrown around a lot and ends up describing all sorts of things that might not be super accurate. So let's take a look at examining some of the history of the legend and where it stems from. Skinwalkers are apparently like really viral on TikTok. I wouldn't know, I gotta be honest, I try to really limit how much time I'm on that. The Skinwalker is a creature of Navajo legend where it's referred to as a Yi Naldushi, and please forgive me if that's pronounced incorrectly. It translates to by means of it, it goes on all fours, referring to their tendency to walk like an animal. Navajo witches and skinwalkers go against traditional Navajo values and are seen as the antithesis of their core beliefs. As well, it's worth adding, legends of skinwalkers and Navajo witches are not particularly well known or well told outside of indigenous communities, and some indigenous advocates and groups are not the biggest fan of their folklore and cultural history being made into fodder for ghost stories. Animals commonly associated with skinwalkers are coyotes, wolves, foxes, eagles, owls, or crows, but skinwalkers are said to be able to have the power to assume the form of any animal they see fit. Now, a variation of the legend surrounding the creature is that they're able to extend this ability to taking the face of a human victim, which is extremely scary. Some legends say that skinwalkers gain power from a victim's fear and that they prey on those who are afraid. And some state that looking into the eyes of one will cause your body to seize up, overtaken by the fear, where it will then attack you. On TikTok, as I've come to understand from some very intensive research and definitely not just goofing off at my desk watching TikToks of cats falling down on my phone, is that skinwalkers are popularly thought to be a creature imitating humans or animals and doing a poor job of it. Which case, if that is true, the likelihood of me being a skinwalker? Sky high. Number 2, Mongolian death worm. Our next entry is a cryptid whose name really says it all. If you ever hear something get described as a Mongolian death worm, you have to figure that is probably not the friendliest form of life out there. For starters, it sounds like it would be way more at home in the dunes of Arrakis than it would be on our Earth. That one's for my Frank Herbert heads out there. The creature is also called Ogoi Korkoi, which translates to large intestine worm, which is, that's just lovely. Appetizing. It allegedly lives in the Gobi Desert, has been evading hunters since the 20s when it first rose to prominence. A paleontologist and author going by the name of Roy Chapman Andrew recounted a story he'd heard at a gathering with several Mongolian officials, where they all talked of the worm at great length. Now, no one among them could claim to have actually seen it, but everyone firmly believed in its existence. In this book, he describes the worm as being about 2 feet long, with no head or limbs to speak of, and has such poisonous skin that direct contact is enough to have you buying the farm. It's described as well as having a sprayable venom and an electric discharge. You should probably see a doctor for that. It burrows underground, only coming up to the surface to hunt and eat, presumably. In 1990, Czechoslovakian cryptozoologist, and wow, that's a mouthful, Ivan Mackerel led a team to try and find the creature in the Gobi Desert. This I love so much because Dune is my favorite book. They use the same technique that the Fremen of Arrakis use to try and find these worms that the Fremen used to deal with the sandworms. They used a rhythmic thumping made from a motor-driven thumper to try and summon the creature out of possible hiding spots. They never found the fabled worm, and that's because they weren't taking spice, so they couldn't see properly. So either it was just a dream, or the thing is very, very good at hiding. And I think with a little work, that could make a fun expression. Oh, it's as hard as trying to find a worm in a desert. we'll workshop it. Number 1, Gashadokuro. And our final entry is gonna come from Japan, and as a fabled mythological creature, and may I just say, is one of my favorite mythical monsters I've read about in a while. As soon as I was reading about this thing, I started texting my friends. I was so excited about it. This thing is a real-life Dark Souls boss fight. Maybe I'm outing myself as way too much of a nerd here, but this thing is where the inspiration for High Lord Walnir and Grave Lord Nito of Dark Souls fame came from. I couldn't resist throwing it out there. Sorry, guys. Formed from tens of thousands of bones of fallen soldiers, the Gashadokuro is a massive titan of a beast, a gigantic skyscraper-sized skeleton. Is that not the coolest thing you've ever heard? A giant which wanders around the countryside during the darkest hours of the night. Their teeth chatter and their bones rattle, which is why the translation for their name translates loosely to rattling skull. You'd have to imagine though, you would probably hear this thing chattering its teeth from a few hundred miles away. You'd hear it in the next town over. It's said that the Gashadokuro is born when mass amounts of soldiers die on the same battlefield. Their bodies rot in the fields and they don't receive proper funerary rites. As such, their souls are filled with torment as their bodies lay face down in the muck, and that malice permeates their bones, causing them to twist and mend into unnatural ways, clumping together to eventually form the humongous skeletal monster of a boss fight, the Gashadokuro. Now, troublesome for humans, it's said that a Gashadokuro is too large and too powerful to be felled by ordinary weapons. Although, I have to wonder if that's still true. I feel like we put more gunpowder in things in 2023 than they did in the Sengoku period, and I'm pretty sure a bulldozer would make short work of a bunch of bones being held together with hatred. It's said that these creatures no longer show up because the amount of dead bodies in one place are not nearly as high as they once were in rural areas of Japan back then, with significantly less wars and plagues occurring, which is a sign of progress, right? You know, if there's so few piles of mass graves that they're no longer reanimating as Godzilla-sized skeleton demons, that's a real positive note for the human race, and I think something we can all smile about. Well, that's about all she wrote, my ghouls and goblins. Thanks so much for listening to me ramble. Creep on creeping on, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy now, okay?